What you gonna do, brother, when Jeff Townsend Media runs wild on you?
Have you been searching for a podcast? Do you want to learn from some great content creators? Well, you've come to the right place. Indie Podcaster with your host, Jeff Townsend, the Indie Podcast Father.
All right. This is Jeff Townsend. Thank you for checking out another episode of Indie Podcaster. This podcast is made for podcasters and other content creators. Certainly don't consider myself a guru, nor either do any of my friends that will be featured in these episodes. But what we do like to do is talk content creation, pick each other's brains, and have a good time. I'm proud to mention that this podcast is sponsored by Indie Drop-In. Now, let me tell you something about Indie Drop-In. This is an awesome network that my friend Greg has created. What he does is drop episodes from independent content creators into his established podcast audience on his feed, and he shares your episodes to an audience that already exists. Yes, it's like free advertisement and promotion for your podcast. He spent a lot of time, money, and effort building it, and he already has an audience interested in the content, and he can certainly help you by sharing your content. It's great promotion. Go to indiedropin.com/creators and check it out. If you're a comedy, true crime, paranormal, or various other different kinds of podcasts, you can benefit from this. So I really encourage you, once again, go to indiedropin.com/creators and see if you can get your stuff featured on Indie Drop-In. We'll go back to the podcast here, Indie Podcaster. So what we've currently been doing is sharing content from 3 different projects that I'm involved in. The first is Good Morning Podcasters with my good friend Fuzz Martin. We also do some content on Podcasting Sucks. And then in these episodes, you will also hear some content from Podcasting Power Hour. Podcasting Power Hour is a live thing we do on Twitter Spaces. We get a whole bunch of great podcast minds together and we talk podcasting. So if you're a content creator, a podcaster, I think you'll take something away from every episode of the content I'm going to share with you. With that being said, make sure you check out Indie Drop-In and make sure you enjoy this episode. I think it's important that we all continue to learn and grow every day, and that will help us become even better content creators. That's certainly what I try to do, learn something new every day. I'm excited to share this content with you. I think it'll be a learning experience for you. Let's get to this episode, and I hope you have a great time listening to it.
Good morning, podcasters. There are more changes coming to your Twitter feed. Woohoo. My name is Fuzz Martin, and this is Good Morning Podcasters. Thank you for downloading, streaming, listening to the 33rd episode of the new version of the show. There have been plenty of changes to Twitter recently, and the new owner, sometimes I don't say his name like he's Voldemort. The new owner recently set the Guinness World Record for the largest drop in personal wealth. Elon Musk is reported to, I said his name. Elon Musk is reported to have lost somewhere between 182 and $200 billion. That's billion with a B. From November of 2021 until now. Most of that has to do with him buying eggs. No, most of that has to do with the drop in Tesla stock value. But some argue that a lack of focus now that he has purchased Twitter is one of the causes for the drastic drop in stock prices. But that is neither here nor there. Some upcoming changes to Twitter were recently announced, and that affects perhaps you and me. And one in particular that you may have seen is that your Twitter feed now has 2 tabs that you can toggle between at the top of your feed. One is called For You, and the other is called Following. If that seems familiar to you, that's because it's a direct ripoff of TikTok. Twitter, which was once the most sought-after social media platform, is now the Wish version of its younger brother. I will say this, the Twitter algorithm in the For You tab is nowhere close to how good TikTok's algorithm is, but perhaps it'll improve soon. Who knows? Optimism, right? On top of that, there are some relatively important changes coming. I'm not sure that they're going to be a part of Twitter Blue. I don't know if you're going to have to pay for these or if all of us plebes are getting them. Remember when Twitter was 140 characters and we didn't have things like threads? I sound like an old man. back in 2008. Well, the first big change here is that as of February, they're going to have tweets that are 4,000 characters long. Perhaps Elon should have purchased Facebook instead. While long tweets will be in the feed, you'll have to click a read more button in order to expand them and see the non-truncated version. But brevity was like Twitter's one thing it had going, and now it's gone. So instead of a nice little tweet, we'll now have like, I don't know, brays or bellows. Next big update. Last week, Elon Musk announced that Twitter is getting bold, underline, and italic formatting features coming soon. As one Twitter commenter wrote, we can only beg for Comic Sans. And the last big update for this week's episode, there'll be more, I'm sure, in future episodes. If there is a Twitter handle that you've had your eye on, it is rumored that Twitter will start selling usernames online via online auctions. They're going to have to sell a whole bunch to make up $44 billion. And unfortunately, the username @Fuzz won't be available anytime soon. That gentleman grabbed the handle in 2006, 2 full years before I joined. That's okay. So will any of these updates change how you market your podcast? Possibly. You can start offering long-form content on Twitter. As a purist, I'm going to be slightly annoyed at first, but I'm sure I'll get over it. I actually enjoyed when we went to 280 characters, so 4,000 characters is what it is. You still have to put out good content. It doesn't matter how long it is. Also, if you've been trying to get a certain dormant handle for your podcast, there's a possibility that you'll be able to snag it up soon, so that could help. I'm not sure what it's going to cost you, but again, it could help your marketing efforts. And I'm really not sure how bolding, underlining, or italicizing tweets is going to help with your marketing. But if you're a first mover, once it's live, now that you have that knowledge, it might give you a nice little bump in your engagement for a couple of weeks when people who haven't figured it out yet see yours and are enamored by it and click into it and perhaps interact and ask you, hey, how'd you get the bold font? There you go. The wild, wild west of Twitter gets a bit more wild. Hopefully we'll soon be able to pick our top 8 friends and we can all learn how to make HTML updates on our profile pages. Thank you for listening to Good Morning Podcasters. I want to quickly plug Matt Navarra's wonderful Geek Out newsletter. It is a fantastic source for those of you who are interested in social media marketing. I geek out over it, and that's why I read the Geek Out newsletter. You can Google Geek Out newsletter to find it. I'll also link to it in the show notes for this episode. And finally, thank you for listening to Good Morning Podcasters. New episodes come out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And since this is Monday's episode, the next one comes out on Wednesday. All the episodes are available at goodmorningpod.com. If you like the show, you know what to do. Follow me. And I will talk to you on Wednesday right here on Good Morning Podcasters. Good morning, podcasters. I have a guest today, and we're going to be discussing how the basics of improv can improve your show. Hello, everyone. I'm Fuzz Martin, and this is Good Morning Podcasters. 3 times a week, I present you with some news, skills, new tools, actionable ideas that'll help you improve your podcast by way of marketing, advertising, PR, and social media. And today is no different. It's a little different, though, because it's the first time that I have a guest on Good Morning Podcasters since I took it over from Tanner Campbell back in November. But we're going to be learning all about a skill that you can use to make your interviewing, interactions, and even your negotiations better. Scott Cavelli, content manager at Epic Creative and a member of the Fish Sticks Improv Comedy Team, is joining me to talk about the basics of improv, how you can learn more about it, and how improv will improve your life all around. But first, today's show is brought to you by podcastpage.io. Having a home base for your podcast is imperative to your show's success. That home base should be your own website. You don't want to be beholden to a social media platform because you never know when a new owner is going to come in and change everything, or when you're going to get an unwarranted content strike that takes down your whole marketing platform. Having a website serves as a main hub for your show, and Podcast Page makes it super easy. With Podcast Page, new web pages are automatically created based on your show's RSS feed every time you publish a new episode. You don't have to spend a bunch of time coding and creating. They have tons of design options, pre-made templates, and beautiful themes, along with a full drag and drop page builder. Podcast Page.io also includes a full blog. They've got guest profile pages and even intake and contact forms, as well as a voicemail widget. That's a lot of stuff, and I'm just scratching the surface. Get started today. Go to podcastpage.io, and thank you to Podcast Page for sponsoring today's episode. My homework is out of the way. Scott Cavelli, writer, PR guy, content director, improv troupe member. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for wearing a tuxedo.
Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, got to dress for the part, right?
Yes.
So glad to be here. Thanks again, Fuzz.
Yeah. We've worked together for a while. How long ago was it that you started doing improv?
So I've been a fan of improv for my whole life. I remember as a kid staying up past my bedtime to watch Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Mm-hmm.
And then even like in middle school and high school youth group growing up, we would play things that I didn't know were improv games at the time, but ended up being, like, realizing after the fact. And also, yeah, just kind of enjoying the fun of riffing and comedy and kind of having things spontaneously happen in conversation. But I've been professionally in improv for about 4 years as a part of a national improv group called Fish Sticks Comedy. We have 4 troops across the country in Milwaukee/Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta, and Denver.
Outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like that first time that you started doing improv, like officially started doing improv?
It's exhilarating.
Yeah.
It's so fun just being able to create something new, to go up on stage and to not really know where it's going to go, but to just trust your teammates. And I mean, that's a big part of it, is to, it's so different from, say, watching stand-up comedy where they have this prepared thing and it's honed. Everything is thought through and figured out. And there's an amazing skill in that. But in improv, it's just, let's go find something together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exploration, and it's trust. And Fish Sticks is a great group, and I got to learn with them and figure out how to do it. And it was like, I remember going to a class with them and coming home and being like, there's nothing I want to talk about anymore other than this. Like, You're not going to believe what happened. It was great. So
you are taking, or you have taken classes on it. You didn't just jump in and start doing it.
So the Fish Sticks offers, as many places do, improv classes for, helping with ideation and team building. And then I just kind of started working with them and kind of got called up to the big leagues, I guess, from one of the classes.
During COVID, I knew that you were doing Fish Sticks Comedy. I have always had a love for the Second City, and we're bored on Zoom for forever. I decided to take some online classes, and it was really cool. Like Zoom based improv, not as cool as in person in real life kind of situations, but you still learn some of the basic rules of improv. Can you tell us like a little bit about what those rules are and what improv is? Yeah.
So someone who's listening who doesn't know much about improv and they only know that you make it up, they're probably like, wait, rules of improv? Like, that's not a thing.
Here are the 37 tried and true rules.
And you can never divert from them at all. No, so the rules are basically, you have to, the one that many people have heard is yes and, which means you accept the reality that your partner or that your scene creates, and then you build on that. Some people also call it heightening, where you just take the thing that's in front of you, whether it be tangible or the situation in front of you, and you just elevate. You keep heightening and heightening. And then the other things are really just like listening and trusting. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that more here in the next few minutes, but it's about not just having your own idea of what's going to happen. Like, sometimes you'll walk into a scene and we don't have a relationship, you and I, but we need to create one. And if I say like, Grandma, it's so good to see you. And you're like, I'm not your grandma, I'm your dad. Like, that's
Right.
no fun. And that's like
oh, you just
confusing to the audience. So like, if
killed
I
it.
say, oh, Grandma, it's so good to see you, you've got to be like, oh, Scott, it's so wonderful. Like, you have to just, you're a grandma now because I've like endowed you with that.
Yes. Thanks for making me your grandma.
Well, sorry. Yeah.
No, you don't. Rule 2, don't apologize.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. That, and since I'm wearing a tuxedo and you're wearing a nightgown.
Yeah.
That's,
well, I do look like your grandma. I can see how you put that together, and you know what? It's true.
So it's not, what makes it so different from stand-up is like, I have a thing that I'm going to communicate to you and I have it all planned out.
I've practiced and I've tweaked some things. Yeah.
And with improv, it's, you've got to listen to the team and go with something that you may not have thought of even 5 seconds ago.
Yeah. And then keep heightening it until mom tells you to stop.
Yeah.
So
right. Well, it's kind of like in that show, I Think You Should Leave. Like, the premise of that show is just like taking a situation. I know it's not improv.
Yeah.
But it's like taking a situation and then just like ratchet it up. Like, just keep going. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The skills that you've learned from improv don't just spill over onto the stage or in front of whomever you're performing in front of. They also spill into your work life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the main things is listening, being a good listener in improv. And, since we're talking about podcasts, right? In interviewing someone, it's not just having a list of questions. It's about listening to what the person's saying and going off of that. And sometimes it's ripping up your sheet of questions that you have, or throwing away the idea of what you thought you might be talking about, and actually listening to them and engaging with them, and kind of being in the moment. That's a kind of a cliche thing to say about it, but being in the moment of actually being here, and we're creating something right in front of us that didn't exist before.
Right. And you're only saying that because I just edited out a portion where I was looking at my notes.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Perfect. Now, we have, and particularly you have, actually given a number of different learning seminars to our clients, to people in our community, and really teaching them about the importance of being able to improv with somebody, but again, putting your trust in who you're working with, and really working in a way that you can lean on one another and finally get to a place where you're trying to go, or where a good place, I guess. It's not necessarily always where you're trying to go, but where it takes you, but in a way that is, I guess, cohesive and fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this makes me think of a quote from James Clear. He was the author of the book Atomic Habits. I don't know if your listeners have read that book. It's a popular book, but he said, preparing for, I'm going to butcher it, but it's basically like, preparing doesn't just mean preparing for a couple of different outcomes. Preparing means preparing for uncertainty. It's preparing for the, I don't know what's going to happen, or like preparing for the thing that I wasn't prepared for. And I think in my line of work with public relations and with clients and with things that you can't always predict, but you have to be in a place of kind of yes-anding those situations and saying, all right, here's a curveball we've been thrown. How do we manage it? How do we make the most of it? And that kind of idea is something that anyone can benefit from, right? Is learning to be adaptable in the moment.
Those times where you don't know where something's going to go, but the two people who are communicating, or more, that are communicating, understand the situation, are able to feed off each other. We've been in a number of spots where people are like, do you guys share a brain? And not only just you and me, but other people here at our office, because we'll get into a client meeting and they'll ask a question that maybe we've never been asked before. And we're able to use each other's strengths that we've learned, or use their body language to understand who's probably likely to know the answer or has a better way.
Right. You know people's strengths. You can play to people's strengths, but then you can also, you all know what the end goal is, at least in the sense of, we know what success is going to look like to some degree, right? We're building towards the same thing, which in improv, it can get really tricky if someone's not playing the game, if they're only in it for punchlines, or if they're only in it for this one idea that they had, but they're not going off of they're not listening to the other suggestions or ideas from the other team members, then it gets real clunky and awkward because they're not moving towards the same goal.
Right. They've got an agenda. And,
yeah, right. They have an agenda or they just aren't listening or whatever. And so then it becomes clear to the audience that the team isn't working towards something.
Do you ever, if you have a situation like that on stage, do you ever like stop and just say, go do stand up, bro?
Right. Yeah. Like, hey, this ain't the comedy cafe.
Hey,
like,
Bill Burr.
Right.
knock that stuff off. I'm holding a banana.
Or it'll be afterwards and I'll say like, hey, so, I kind of threw something at you and either you didn't hear me or we didn't connect on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Waka, waka, waka.
Right. But then the other thing too, in that sense is if things go wrong, there's something in improv about failing, like kind of falling with style where you just give yourself to it, because in improv, one of the most awkward things to see on stage is someone kind of like hesitating or second guessing, or if you get a suggestion of an accent that you have to do that you can't do, well, you've got to try to do a Russian accent, or like you've got to, because if you reject it because like, oh, I can't do that, that's like zero fun for the audience.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, sorry, folks.
So
I'm not the Russian voice guy.
Right. Like failing hard and failing with grace is, a nice part of that too.
Yeah. And that, I don't think, relating this back to podcasting, I don't think you definitely don't have to have a comedy podcast in order to use improv. It can be for all of your interviews, whether you're interviewing, the Pope.
That'd be a good get.
That would be a good get. Yeah. Like you're probably going to get some listeners. So you probably should brush up on your improv skills. No, but if you're interviewing, it doesn't matter if it's a comedian, an author, something serious just happened, being able to read that room, interact, and improvise, if you will, on the spot is important. That's if you have a guest or if you have a co-host, all those sorts of things.
Can I tell a story about a podcast I heard where I just felt like they were horrible at improv and it was real cringy?
Yeah. Good morning, podcasters.
So I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to
out them.
Yeah. I don't want to mudsling, but there was a podcast I was listening to. It was an interview with a musician who had recently left one of my favorite bands. And it was like his first time going on the record about what happened and all this. So this podcast, which I'd never heard of, I downloaded an episode because I'm like, oh, so-and-so is on this episode and he's going to talk about all this stuff. The episode there was zero follow-up questions or riffing or anything. And I'm sure some of it had to do with the editing of the podcast. But the guy, the interviewee, was saying this rich stuff that was begging for follow-up questions on well, how did that happen? And when was that moment? And, all this, how did that make you feel? And how does it feel with this, the band that you were in is now, more successful and all this stuff. And there were zero follow-ups. It was as though the interviewer was just going down his list. He didn't even react to the responses. It wasn't like, he didn't even do the yeah, oh, that must have been hard. And then just kept going.
Yeah.
It just was. And I'm sitting there going, no, please listen to what he's saying and throw your sheet away and just have a conversation with him. Don't just have a list of questions.
Sure.
So
going down next on my list. No. I appreciate you coming on the show today. I know it's something that you kind of have to get into in order to understand it. Where if somebody wanted to get involved or start learning improv, what would you recommend they do? Let's say they don't even live near any of the fish stick places. What would somebody do if they wanted to learn more about improv?
There are definitely resources like Second City and others that have online articles that you can read about improv. But I would say if you really want to get into it, there might be a local troupe nearby who does classes. There are Zoom and virtual things that you can do, but it's nothing like getting up in front of a group of people. I promise you the thing with improv is you get out of it what you put into it, as with many things. And if you're interested in just learning how to think on your feet or come up with ideas or listen better or be a better team member, just going and playing improv with people who even know a few improv games can really, kind of loosen you up and unlock creativity that you didn't think you had. A lot of people see me do improv and my team and they say, like, oh, I could never do that. And it's like, no, you definitely can. You just kind of have to get into it and get more familiar with it. And everyone has the ability to be creative and think on their feet. You just have to exercise that muscle.
You said before we started recording, when you first went to Fish Sticks, what did they say to you?
Oh, yeah. In the first class, they said, hey, one of the best things about improv is that you don't have to be funny. And I said, I'm in. and honestly, if you're not focused on being funny, you can get out of your head and just have real moments on stage or in an improv scene. And one of the things about real moments is that a lot of people can relate to them. And that's honestly what makes things funny, is because they're relatable. So when I knew, all right, it's not about making jokes, it's about making moments together, I thought that was great, and it took a lot of the pressure off. Before we go, I want you to promote your new book, which is coming out. Yeah, it's called Somehow I Manage, and it's got a picture of me on the cover shrugging. That's a joke from The Office. But I should have improv something that wasn't from a TV show. No book, not yet. No book. All right. Well, we'll get you there. Yeah. Scott, thank you for coming on. Good morning, podcasters. We appreciate it. And again, for those listening, I really recommend going and exploring it. Just explore, or go watch some improv and see how that all works. Go watch, is it Don't Think Twice? Is that the name of the movie? So there's a movie, Don't Think Twice, that's another one. It's a show on Netflix that's long form improv. It's called Middleditch and Schwartz. Oh, okay. It's a different kind of improv than I do. It's long form, which, that's a different podcast. Sure. But that's a really fun show that's like on stage improv comedy. But Don't Think Twice is a movie about an improv troupe that you learn a lot about improv comedy in that. Also, with Mike Birbiglia and a number of others. Yes. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Scott Cavelli, for joining me today on Good Morning Podcasters. New episodes of this show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can find it all at goodmorningpod.com. You're a podcaster, so I know that you know the drill. Be sure to click the follow button so you get new episodes in your podcatcher each and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we'll talk to you again on Friday right here on Good Morning Podcasters. Good morning, podcasters. I had buyer's remorse about my website, so I changed it. Let's talk about it. I feel like a curmudgeon when it comes to the phrase Happy Fry-yay, but it brings some people joy. So happy Fry-yay. Now I need to go take a shower. My name is Fuzz Martin, and this is Good Morning Podcasters, a podcast dedicated to helping podcasters like you learn about marketing, advertising, PR, and social media, so promoting your show becomes easier for you. I am a partner at an advertising agency. I've been there for 12 years. Before that, I was in radio. I was a morning show host and program director. I did that for 15 years. And before that, I was a pre-farm student who decided to try out for the university's radio program on lunch one day. And that's how I got here. Back in the early 2000s, while I was working in radio, the station did not have a website. I actually remember our general manager, who reminded me a lot of Michael Scott. And he said, "We have a radio station. What do we need a website for?" So I took it upon myself to learn how to make a website. It was hard back then. I ended up buying a copy of Microsoft Front Page on my own and put together a site for my show. At the time, it was fuzzmartin.com. And I learned how to make websites. I enjoyed the challenge a lot. I kept updating it. Then I moved from Front Page to Dreamweaver. And then in 2002, I found WordPress. And I learned how to install WordPress, but that also required that I learned some PHP and MySQL skills.
So I learned that. And then eventually I created the radio station's first website for free because radio stations are offensively cheap. Then I started creating other people's and their businesses' websites on the side. That skill, along with another side project, which was photography, actually helped keep my bills paid through the Great Recession because my radio station had put me on furlough 1 week a month, even though they had to pay somebody to come in and do my show. They just thought it'd be symbolically good if I was also laid off for a week each month. Great times. Suffice it to say, I'm no longer in radio. And now I'm an owner at a full-service advertising agency that has a full team of in-house web designers and developers and SEO people and writers and graphic designers, all sorts of things. All of that is a long way of saying I know my way around a website. My first instinct whenever I need a website is to go right to WordPress. But as a husband, a dad, a business owner, I also care about optimizing my time. And while I love podcasting, I truly love and enjoy podcasting. I cannot spend all my time doing podcast things on the side. All the things that I would do if I didn't have other obligations. But I do have obligations. And you likely do too. All of this is leading to a point. When I started Good Morning Podcasters, I told myself I wouldn't spend time building a WordPress site, even though that's typically what I would do. Instead, I looked at the templates on Squarespace and said, hey, those are kind of great looking. I found a podcaster that had a promo code, and I bought a year's worth of a Squarespace site. Hopefully that podcaster has gotten paid, and it helped them out. I had goodmorningpod.com up and running in about a day, and it looked good. However, after about 20 episodes, I found it was a real drag to try to get the site updated for every single episode, on top of recording and editing the episode, writing the show notes, transcribing, creating an episode graphic, all the social media stuff, all of that. I hated having to simultaneously flip between scheduling my show on my host's platform and then writing and scheduling a blog post to accommodate it on my website. On another podcast that I have, which is a hyperlocal podcast called 15 Minutes with Fuzz, I had been using podcastpage.io. I had actually learned about it from one of Tanner Campbell's episodes of his show sometime around August of 2021. So even though I had already spent $240 for a year's worth of Squarespace so I could get the biggest discount that was available to me, I decided to change directions and move goodmorningpod.com over to podcastpage.io. I did this to save time and because really that's the level of website that this podcast needs. So once I got my account set up, the new account for Good Morning Pod, it pulled in every episode into the system in a few minutes via my RSS feed. And then maybe it took 2 hours of sitting on the couch customizing the pages and templates. Customization is really simple. They've got a number of different templates that you can choose from. They also have a really nice drag and drop editor for the non-episode pages. I created a contact page with a form. It automatically pulls in my show's reviews, and I created a reviews page, which I was able to customize the layout for. It has all of the search optimization tools that you need for a podcast website, including the ability to change your open graph and search results image, which I've talked about on a recent episode. There's also a full blog. I may implement that soon, but I don't have it up and running right now because, again, I'm focusing on reducing my work time. You can import your YouTube channel. I'm not currently using that feature only because my YouTube channel is admittedly extremely mailed in at this point. I am directly feeding YouTube through a Headliner app connection, and I put zero time into it. It is automated. I pay Headliner like $30 a month, and they automatically upload that to YouTube for me every single episode. Thanks, Headliner, but sorry to my one subscriber on YouTube. I hope you are okay knowing that cold, hard truth. This video that you're watching right now, I put no time into. The biggest reason I love this change over to podcastpage.io is that it is so easy. After I record and edit this episode, I will upload it to my host, which is Captivate, and I will also simultaneously upload it to otter.ai to get the transcription process rolling. Then I will write my show description in a more thought out way that feels like a blog post. Once the transcription is done, I'll add that into Captivate, and I will schedule the episode. When the episode goes live, podcastpage.io will automatically pull in the new episode from the RSS feed. It'll turn it into a new page on the website, and we're up and running. Then in the morning, I will go to podcast page. I'll go to the new episode page, and I'll add in my episode graphic, my social sharing episode graphic. Again, to the people who run RSS, please put OpenGraph into the RSS feed. Also, by the way, I do a different social graphic than I do for the show graphic. I like to keep the episode graphic as the main album cover art for Good Morning Podcasters because I think the logo stands out more by itself in a podcast player, but on social media, then it looks different every time. It's just a matter of branding and taste, you know? If you're looking to save some time without sacrificing pretty much anything in terms of customization, branding, or content creation, I highly recommend podcastpage.io. I'm glad I switched from my previous hosting platform. It's helping prevent pod fade for me, frankly. If you're struggling with your time or the ability to create a good-looking website without needing to know code or design, you'll enjoy it too. It's podcastpage.io. Thank you again for listening to Good Morning Podcasters. You can find each and every one of these episodes at goodmorningpod.com. Of course, hit the follow button in your podcast player in order to get these delivered to your inbox whenever they come out, which is 3 times a week. The next episode of Good Morning Podcasters launches on Monday. We might even have a surprise Podcasting Sucks on Saturday. We'll see. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you either tomorrow or Monday right here on Good Morning Podcasters. Good morning, podcasters. I want to share a tool with you that is great for people like you and colorblind people like me. And I promise you that it ties into podcasting. Stick around and I will connect the dots, just not the dots where you ask me which number I see. Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. This is Good Morning Podcasters, and I am Fuzz Martin, a business owner, writer, former broadcaster, and strong pro-tan. Strong pro-tan, what is that? Great question. A strong pro-tan is a type of red-green color blindness that causes the red cones in your eyes to detect too much green light and skimp on the red light. And this throws a whole bunch of things off, not just green and red. I often mix up blues and purples, yellows and greens, orange and greens, reds and browns, browns and greens. Sometimes it depends on the backgrounds and light temperature and all of that. I didn't know the Minnesota Vikings wore purple until I was in college. I once got pulled over for running what I thought was a flashing yellow stoplight. It happened to be flashing red. I proudly own a pink water bottle because Nalgene decided to call their colors Surfer instead of pink, and it looked to me like it was blue on Amazon. But that's okay. I proudly use it. And then I tell people that Nalgene is ableist if anybody asks why I have a pink water bottle. And back in the 3rd grade, my mom couldn't afford Crayola crayons, so she bought me Kmart brand, which didn't have the names written on them. I remember getting in trouble by Mrs. Dewey for going too fast and not paying attention. And while those were probably both true, I have a minor disability, and she lacked patience. All of this is to say I had to adapt, and thankfully there's a tool out there for me. On Friday's episode, I talked about how I used to create websites, and as you can imagine, it was relatively difficult. I used to have to ask girlfriends or buddies who are designers to tell me what colors I'm picking and then help me with the hex codes on websites. However, sometime back around 2010, Adobe created a website called Cooler, Kuler, to help everybody find colors better. And then in 2014, they renamed the site Adobe Color. I thought Cooler was cooler, but it's their product and they can do what they want. Adobe Color is helpful for people like me because I can search for something like, let's say, dark red, and it will give me a bunch of color combinations that include dark red and then some colors that look good and go along with it. Then I can simply grab the hex codes, the CMYK or RGB settings, and then I'm off and running. This site isn't for colorblind people. I think this site is actually for designers who want to explore trending colors and look at different color combinations not inside their work that they're creating. You can use their Explore tab to find color combinations that are trending and hot right now. You can upload an image and it will create a color theme or find one for you that's based on that image. It has a contrast checker to be sure the colors that you select will be visible to people who are colorblind, and then it makes suggestions on how to improve your color combination. You can import your color libraries super easily. Like as soon as you save them, they roll over to Photoshop if you have Photoshop and Illustrator, even Adobe Express if you prefer to use that instead of Canva. And if you do use Canva, you can simply copy the hex codes from your Adobe color libraries and paste them into your brand kit inside Canva. So how can you use it for your podcast? Let's say you're creating new cover art or social media graphics, or you're looking to rebrand your podcast, something along those lines. You can find a color palette and search through all the different color palettes that they have available, and there are thousands upon thousands of them. You can even create a color palette with one color, and then it will help you with complementary colors. And then you can save them to your library, and then you'll always have those colors at your fingertips when you're creating new work. It really helps making sure that you're staying on brand with your colors easy, whether you're in the 1 out of 12 men in the world who are colorblind, one of the 1 in 200 women in the world who are colorblind, or if you're more likely, one of those fully color-sighted people. Must be nice. Oh, by the way, it's also free. One other colorblind anecdote. Before I met my wife, I briefly dated a woman who was colorblind, and I just thought the genetics of this were interesting. If she ever had a boy child, that child would automatically be colorblind because colorblindness travels on the X chromosome. There you go. Dropping a little science for you here on Good Morning Podcasters. So check it out, color.adobe.com. Again, it's free. It'll help you get your colors in line and make your podcast brand better. That'll do it for today's episode of Good Morning Podcasters. If you ever have any questions for me or the show, I'm fully accessible. Email me fuzz@goodmorningpod.com. That's fuzz@goodmorningpod.com, or DM me on Twitter. New episodes come out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, with bonus episodes of a show called Podcasting Sucks with Jeff Townsend on Saturday mornings. Podcasting Sucks is available right here in the Good Morning Podcasters feed, and all the episodes are available online at goodmorningpod.com. There we go. Kept that nice and short, down to about 7 CTAs for you this morning. Thanks again for listening. We will talk to you Wednesday right here on Good Morning Podcasters.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Indie Podcaster. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in learning more about this podcast, you can go to podcastfather.com. If you're interested in all the different kind of work that I'm doing, you can go to jefftownsend.media. Contact form on there, various other different podcasts and projects that I'm involved in that I think you will enjoy. But again, thank you for supporting me, and make sure you support Indie Drop-In Network like we covered in the beginning. Get your podcast featured on there. Until I see you next time, take care of yourself and keep being you and keep being great.
Jeff Townsend Media. CG, good night.
And the question is, do I stay here? Will you be back? Are you gonna come back? Will you be back? Are you coming back?